and moving that it affected your entire body. It left you shaking and aching to the very, as we say, pit of your stomach. That's a gut-wrenching experience. I'll always remember, I wish I could forget, but I will always remember when I was about 14 years old, I was riding down the interstate in a car with my father, and the car in front of us, going about 70, 80 miles an hour, suddenly left the highway, went off into the ditch, and rolled over several times. My father and I were the first ones on the scene, and all we could do was run to the car and see if there was anything we could do. And I remember this was prehistoric times, before cell phones, before 911. So what can you do? Well, we went to the car and saw that we couldn't get the door open, but looked inside. And I'll never forget seeing the mangled body of the driver of that car. And the helpless feeling of knowing there was nothing we could do to help. Thankfully, after a while, ambulances, fire trucks did arrive, but it was too late. But I will never forget the feeling of standing there shaking and hurting and aching and just wanting to do something, but unable to do anything to help. For me, that was an experience that I will never forget. Sad to say, I've had a number of gut-wrenching experiences in the years since, but I will never forget that one. Jesus also had gut-wrenching experiences in his life. And though he was fully God, he was fully human and shared, and understand this, folks, he shared the same emotions and feelings that you and I had. Well, in our message today, we're going to read about a gut-wrenching encounter with Jesus and realize the emotion and the concern that Jesus has for each one of us. The lectionary reading for today forms a sandwich, if you will, around the accounts of the feeding of the 5,000 and Jesus walking on the water. Around those two incredible miracles are accounts that let us know about Jesus' concern, feelings, and emotions toward people. Let's get a little background to our story. We're in the Gospel of Mark once again. And if you remember, the Gospel of Mark focuses on answering the question, who is Jesus? And it also focuses on the fact that in Jesus, the kingdom, the rule, or the reign of God has been inaugurated on the earth and is disrupting the powers of evil and the economies of the world. Now, so far in chapter 6, where we are today, Jesus has been rejected in his hometown, Nazareth. He's been called insane by members of his own family. He has sent the 12 out on their first solo mission throughout Galilee. John the Baptist has been imprisoned and beheaded, executed, killed. And Jesus feeds the 5,000 and walks on water. That's a lot of action right there in chapter 6. There's a lot of action. So today we're going to slow down a bit and look at Mark chapter 6, but focus on these two sandwich accounts that show us the concern, the emotions, and the feelings of Jesus during this period of time. We look at Mark chapter 6. We begin reading in verse 30. Mark 6, verse 30. The apostles gathered around Jesus. They're coming back now from their mission trip, and so they gather around Jesus. Now, the word apostle is worth noting. It comes from the verb that means to send. But when you make a noun out of it, it is the one sent. And in Greco-Roman culture of the day, an apostle was an emissary, an ambassador. It was someone someone sent who acted with the full authority of whoever sent the person. So in other words, what we're seeing, the 12 were apostles because they went out and they acted, they did things, they helped people, and they taught with the full authority of the one who sent them, that is Jesus. So the apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done, and as the Greek says, what they had taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going, they did not even have a chance to eat. If you can imagine that, they're tired, they're weary, they've just come back from all over Galilee, back to meet Jesus, and they're reporting, and even as they're reporting, crowds are gathered. One thing we've seen already in the book of Mark is how many people, thousands of people, followed Jesus everywhere he went to where he couldn't get a moment's rest, and many times didn't even have time to eat. But when you have someone who teaches like Jesus did, and someone who feeds you miraculously, and someone who heals all your diseases, well, of course, you would want to get out and follow them and get in on food and on the healing and the teaching as well. So thousands followed him. Now, we can only imagine that the reason they didn't have time to eat and any rest was that people were asking questions. People were pushing forward, and they all wanted to touch Jesus and be near him. And so the 12 probably had to act as crowd control, holding people back, but also doing their own counseling, their own teaching, and answering people's questions and saying, well, I represent Jesus, what can I do for you? But thousands of people upon these 12 or 13 individuals. And they didn't even have time to eat or get any rest, and they're already exhausted from having traveled all over the cities of Galilee. So because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. Now, what does this tell us? Well, it tells us, one, that Jesus had compassion on the 12. He knew they were tired. He knew that they didn't even have time to eat. And he was concerned for them, for their health, for their well-being. And so he said, come on, let's get together. Let's go to a private place where you can relax, have a little peace for a while, and rest up. Now, if you've ever been a caregiver, maybe you haven't, you know the demands. Some of you had amazing experiences. I had to be a caregiver for my mother and father. My father had dementia. My mother had Alzheimer's. They came to live with us. I'm their only child, so I had to take care of them. And of course, I had my wife's help. But it was a challenging time until they both passed, I'll tell you that. Being a caregiver is not easy. It affects you emotionally. You might say it's a gut-wrenching experience many times, and physically fatiguing. And with my wife over this past year, it's not been easy. You have to take over all the household chores, all the duties, the cooking, the cleaning, the landscaping, gardening, the paying the bills, cooking the food, serving the food, cleaning up, and it's challenging. And caregivers need care. So if you're in a position of a caregiver or find yourself in that position, realize you've got to take some time out. You have to have care for the caregiver, or somebody's going to have to come and take care of you. So Jesus had compassion upon the 12, and he said, come on, fellas, let's go by ourselves. Let's get some rest. Let's get some food in you. Let's have some downtime. All of this has happened. All of this has come upon us. My relative, John the Baptist, has been executed. He's been beheaded. We have just gone through one thing after another. We need some downtime. We need some rest time. All of us as human beings need that. So verse 32. So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. All right? Here's where most commentators believe they went. So they were here, probably at Capernaum. And they got in a boat and went, according to Luke at least, over here somewhere in Bethsaida. Bethsaida means house of hunting or house of fishing. It was kind of a place where you loaded up on hunting and fishing gear, depending on what you were going to do, or as I call it. I think translated into English, Bethsaida would be Bass Pro Shop. So they went over somewhere near the Bass Pro Shop, somewhere around here in a deserted place. But notice, that's a very short trip, you can see. It's a very short trip, and they probably didn't get very far away from shore. So you might ask, well, why did they go in a boat? To get away. I think the first solitary place they found was the boat, where the people can't get at them. So at least for the time they were in the boat, they had some peace and quiet, a little bit of rest. So they went away by themselves into a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. Oh, you can't get away. You can't catch a break. Now, what's interesting too is that there were many who saw them. Well, as you saw from the map, they're not very far offshore. And the Sea of Galilee is not a very big lake, actually. And they were probably not far from the coastline, the shoreline. And so people could actually see them in the boat going. And they said, hey, we know them. They've been all over Galilee. They feed people. They do miracles. They heal people. Let's go. Follow them. And so you can imagine them jogging along on foot along the shoreline all the way. And the Red Sea at that point, sometimes it's very dry and it's not hard to cross. I mean, not the Red Sea, but the River Jordan. And it's easy to cross. So they probably just ran right across even the shallow end of the River Jordan and tried to follow them over to this remote spot somewhere near Bethsaida. So many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he was ticked off. He was angry. He was perturbed that these people kept annoying him. No. When he saw a large crowd, he had compassion. Dead tired, emotionally distraught. And yet when he saw these people so anxious to just see him, to get near him, to receive something from him, he had nothing but compassion for those people. Because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began to teach them many things. Now, the word here in Greek is translated compassion. Compassion in English just doesn't quite do it justice. We get the word compassion, calm, and passion. Passion means feelings, and calm meaning with. So you feel with. This is much more than just feeling with someone. This is much more than our English word compassion conveys. The Greek verb form is splagnidzomai. Yeah, it's easy for me to say. Splagnidzomai. It's made up of the Greek word splagnia, which means your internal organs. I say internal organs, which is a nice way of saying it. You know what I mean. It means all your internal organs. And it's in, the verb here is in the middle tense, which we don't have in English, but it's in Greek, it means that the subject is acting, but also receiving the force of the action. And that's the term that's used here. So there's something going out from Jesus, but there's also something coming back upon him. He had, the way I like to translate it, he was gut-wrenched. It was a gut-wrenching experience for him to see these multitudes of people so desperate, so needy, and they were like sheep without a shepherd. And you can go back to the Old Testament, to the book of Ezekiel, chapter 34, first few verses there, which talk about that they are God's sheep, the sheep of his pasture, his people. God is his shepherd, and they are his sheep. But the shepherds of Israel, the leaders of the people, both religious and civil, who should have been helping and guiding the people, are worse than useless. They're bad. They're evil. They're in it for themselves, and they don't care about the sheep. What a condemnation of the leaders of the nation of Israel at that time. So, they needed a shepherd, and they didn't have one. All they had was people who didn't care about them. But Jesus cared, and he saw that they needed a shepherd. Why do sheep need a shepherd? Domestic sheep, I'm not talking about rams or wild sheep. But why do domestic sheep need a shepherd? Sheep tend to move around aimlessly. They don't know where they're going, they just kind of move around. And they tend to follow each other. So if one gets headed in a direction, the others just tend to follow. And literally, if that one went off a cliff, the whole herd of sheep would go off the cliff behind them. If they waded into the water, they were thirsty, they waded into the water, they'd all wade into the water, their wool would become full of water, they could drown. Now, I'm not saying sheep are the dumbest of all creatures, but let's just say we're not going to ace the SAT test. And so they need help. They really need help. They have little need for danger. A wolf or whatever could come upon them, and they would hardly notice it until it was way too late. They tend to eat grass until it's gone. They'll eat it right down until there is no grass, and then just stay there and die. They don't have a concept of moving on to find fresh grass. A shepherd has to lead them to green pastures. They won't go on their own. They'll just sit there and die. They'll overeat an area till all the grass and the vegetation is gone, and there's nothing there, and there won't be until the following year, and that's the end of the flock without a shepherd to lead and guide them. According to what I've read, sheep, when they fall over, can't get back up. They're designed only to be upright, and if anything happens, they just lie there till they die. They can't get back without a shepherd to find any sheep that have fallen down and lift them with a stroke or whatever to help them get back up. Sheep are needy creatures. They're very helpless by themselves. They have to have a shepherd to take care of them. So that's what Jesus means when he says, I just feel gut-wrenched for these people because they are like sheep without a shepherd. And I've got to help them. So he began to teach them many things. In other words, he became their shepherd. Verse 53, now skipping down. When they had crossed over, the Sea of Galilee to the east, when they had crossed over, from the east back now to the west, they landed at Gennesaret and anchored there. All right, so here's the map. So, what it looks like is that they went from Capernaum over here somewhere near Bethsaida, but out in the wilderness, away from the town itself. And now they've come back over, as you can see, following the coastline again, down to Gennesaret. So they traveled back. So when they had crossed over, they landed at Gennesaret and anchored there. Now that's interesting. Maybe you've seen pictures of the fishing boats are big enough for, 13, 14 men to sit in, but that's about all. They have often one sail, and they have oars to row with. But it's fairly crowded, 13, 14 men in one fishing boat. Now, what would usually happen is if you were going to fish or stay in the area for a while, clean your nets, you would shove your boat up on the shore, beach it. They didn't do that. They left it off out in the water and anchored it. Now, why do you think they might have wanted to anchor the boat instead of pushing it up on the shore? My guess is they wanted a quick getaway. They put it over that and hop in the boat, pull up the anchor, and be gone, because they knew that everywhere they went, these crowds would just follow them, and they'd never get away, never have any peace, and never be able to do their entire mission. But verse 55, they ran throughout that whole region, that is all these people, and carried the sick on mats to wherever they heard he was. If you can, it's hard to imagine, thousands of people, and they've got all these sick people, and they've got them on what we might call stretchers or mats, and they're carrying them, and they're rushing around everywhere to follow Jesus and the 12 to find a miracle or healing. Verse 56, and wherever he went, into villages, towns, or countryside, they placed the sick. Wherever he went, he could not get away from the crowds. They followed it everywhere. They placed the sick in the marketplaces, in the agora, which is kind of interesting. The comparison today might be Main Street, downtown, the business section, the financial section. Took them right to the heart of the city, of the town, the village, right where commerce was going on, right in the marketplace. We might say today, right in the middle of a big mall or shopping center. And thousands came in of sick people being carried, held in to receive healing. So you've got the poor, the afflicted, the scattered, the rural, coming into the heart of the city in order to be healed by Jesus, just to have a chance to see him, to hear from him. God have mercy, maybe touch him, and be healed. They begged him. Can you imagine how Jesus felt? To see this almost sea of afflicted people. And they're begging him for help. They begged him to let them touch even the edge of his cloak, the tassels that the Jewish folk tended to wear as the males on the end of their garments at that time. Just let me touch the tassel at the end of your garment. That's all I ask. And we talked about the significance of touching before, like touching the ark of God for a miracle. They begged him to let them touch even the edge of his cloak, and all who touched it were healed. It was not his mission to heal everybody, but it was just such a gut-wrenching experience. He couldn't deny it. They come and they begged, and he felt for them, and it tore him up inside. And so he healed them. Jesus had compassion on the people. He wasn't irritated by them. He wasn't annoyed by them. I think you read at times, especially in the feeding of the 5,000, remember when all the people are hungry, Jesus said, give them something to eat, and the disciples were annoyed. And send them away. They don't go away. And Jesus said, no. We're going to take care of it. That's what we're going to do. So we have seen in this story Jesus as a person of great compassion. He is a person who experiences gut-wrenching emotions from his concern for us. To paraphrase what the author of Hebrews states about Jesus, He sympathizes with our weaknesses. He has been tried and tested just like us. Therefore, we can approach the throne of grace with boldness and receive mercy and find grace to help in our time of need. That is what Jesus is like. But that is what God is like. There is not some other God hiding behind Jesus. Like Jesus was a nice guy, but God, oh man, you don't want to mess with him. Because he's pretty cranky. He's an old guy. And you know how old guys are. He's a cranky old man. Don't mess with him. Talk to his young son Jesus. Because he's a nice guy. So wrong. So very, very wrong. There is no other God hidden behind Jesus. What you see in Jesus is what you see in God. God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit deeply care about each one of us. God is gut-wrenched. Can you think about that? God is gut-wrenched for you and for me and for all of us. He is gut-wrenched with concern for us so much that he has made a plan that even involved the scourging, the beating, the crucifixion of his only Son. That's how much he loves us. He has a plan to make it all come out all right, no matter what. God is gut-wrenched with concern for us and has made a plan that will heal us, a plan that will save us, every one of us, because he cares for us so very, very much. We are his sheep, whom he loves. He is our good shepherd, who looks out for us, who keeps us from getting lost, who protects us from danger, who sees that we're physically and spiritually nourished. And he has made a house for us, in which we can dwell with him forever. As Jesus is our good shepherd, it was only fitting that we conclude today by reading from the 23rd Psalm. The psalm about the good shepherd. Psalm 23. To give you a little background on this, over a year ago, as most of you know, my wife was hit by a truck while on her bicycle crossing a crosswalk of the street, New City Street. She was hit and dragged around the corner underneath the truck and lay there face down on the blazing hot blacktop, bleeding. She said there was only one thing in her mind. One thing in her mind. And she experienced that. Psalm 23. She said she recited it to herself over and over and over. And she lay there. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me, and your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness, mercy will follow me all the days of my life. Well, house. God, Father, Son, and Spirit, thank you for loving us and being shepherd. As your sheep, we love you, we follow you, and we look forward so very very, very much. Well, really.